I have about 7 rows done here now. And that's probably going to be about enough. Matter of fact, we can play with it here. Because what I'm going to be doing is, once I have enough rows, I'm going to sew it together here. Then I'm going to wrap this around after I sew it and crochet it together. Looks like just about enough. So I don't want this to unravel while I'm sewing. So what I'm going to do is just make some extra loops at the top, just in case it does start unraveling. I won't lose any of this work. And just to make loops, I just have one loop through my needle here. Still going to go over, under, grab it with the hook, pull it through. There's one loop. Under, over, grab it with the hook, pull it through. Second loop. And loops are pretty easy to do, so it's not a big deal if my loop unravels. It's not a whole lot of work rather than trying to do this again. So I'm going to just put up maybe about 15 loops here. And I'm still going to leave it attached. I could go ahead and cut it here and then start sewing, but then I'm going to have to put a knot in it and start again when I'm ready to crochet around. So I'm going to, now that I got enough loops, I'm going to take my needle out, and hopefully I don't lose anything. And then I'm going to sew my loop together here. And that's where we're going to loop it through and put the leash through to make the head. I've already threaded my needle with double thread, and I chose purple. I've already knotted the needle. Now this is the part that was hanging down when I created the initial loop to get started. I'm just going to try to push this over so I can kind of sew it together. That'll help with the unraveling if that ever happens. I'm going to make my loop here. I'm going to adjust this down a little bit. Like I said, you're going to play around with how big you want your loop to be. Just make sure that the leash can fit through it. So there's a loop here. And we'll just test it to make sure this can go through easily. And it does. So we'll work with about this much. And I'm going to go ahead and push the needle through. I'm pushing through with the tape. Be careful not to poke your fingers. And like I said earlier, you can use a thimble if you like. And some rope is harder than others. This one's especially hard. It might not be this tight with some other ropes that you use. I actually bent my needle a little bit on this one. And once you get it started, it's a little easier. Just kind of wrestling it through here. And then just like we did the no frills leash, we're going to just keep looping around and sewing until we feel it's sturdy enough. Be very careful not to poke your fingers. And try to be careful not to get all your strings tangled up as well. But if it does get a knot in it while you're sewing, or it does, get looped up, you can always cut it and just start again. It's not a big deal. And we're going to keep sewing until we feel like it's sturdy enough. As you can see, I've gotten it sewn together. It's very sturdy, very tight. Sewn it on both ends, and it's been sewn through. Notice that it's not very pretty, but it's not a big deal because I'm going to be, this crochet that I just did, I'm going to be wrapping that around like so. And also notice that in the no frills leash, how I wrapped the thread around instead. I didn't use any crochet. Well, I didn't bother to do that in this one because I'm going to be covering up the thread with the crochet anyway. Just going to finish up here by doing a couple of loops in the same place. Actually, now that I've examined this enough, I think my crochet should be a little longer before I get ready to loop it around. I've looped it all the way around and it fits, but I think I'd like to crochet together right about this part instead of down here. So I'm going to sew about 2 more, or actually crochet about 2 more rows here. And notice I had this extra loop here in case anything came unravel. I'm not going to use all of that. So I'm going to unloop to about right here. I'm going to stick my needle through so I won't lose anything. And I'm going to crochet just a couple of more rows. Alright, now I've sewn on a couple of more rows, and now I believe I'm ready to wrap it around. So I'm going to go in this direction so I can be crocheting from the left. I'm just wrapping it again, keeping it tight, covering everything up. Now this part gets a little tricky. Okay, I'm ready to crochet now. I have it all wrapped around.